The stadium of stars stretched across the night sky like a glittering tapestry. Leo Davis craned his neck, trying to take it all in. Massive platforms floated lazily in orbit, each covered with intricate carvings glowing softly with alien symbols. Some sections of the stadium twisted and rearranged themselves in real time, adjusting gravity fields and environmental settings for events Leo couldn't even begin to understand. Spectators, thousands of them, filled the stands, some floating in gelatinous bubbles, others with tentacles slithering over railings, and a few humming melodies that resonated through the open air. Leo tugged nervously at the blue and white Earth insignia on his uniform. He could feel the weight of every hope and expectation back home resting on his shoulders. For the first time in the history of mankind, Earth had been invited to the Galactic Games, and somehow, Leo Davis, a kid from Cleveland who'd spent his life competing in track and field, was chosen to represent humanity. He shifted from foot to foot on the smooth, luminescent ground of the locker area. Around him, alien athletes of all shapes and sizes prepared for the games. Towering insectoids stretched translucent wings. A six-legged being made of glass-like material shimmered as it adjusted its form, and a group of floating spheres hummed together in what Leo guessed was a warm-up chant. Everyone looked built for something extraordinary, whether speed, strength, or abilities that defied human biology altogether. Leo tried not to stare. He wanted to act cool, like he belonged here, but the truth was, he felt like a tiny lost fish who had been dumped into a tank with intergalactic sharks, and those sharks were laughing at him. "Human, huh?" A booming voice interrupted Leo's thoughts. A shadow loomed over him. He turned and came face to chest with the Recton champion, a massive four-armed alien with metallic blue skin and eyes that glowed like hot coals. The alien crossed two of his arms while the other two flexed, muscles rippling beneath shimmering armor. "What did your species send you for, little human? To bring snacks?" A few nearby aliens chuckled. Leo smiled weakly, trying not to let his nerves show. "I figured I'd give you all a chance to meet an underdog," he said, attempting to sound more confident than he felt. The Recton let out a rumbling laugh, his fanged grin wide. "You'll be more than an underdog, little human. You'll be out of your depth." Leo clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to fire back. These athletes weren't just bigger and stronger than him. They were faster, more durable, and enhanced by biology that Earth scientists could only dream of. They could shift forms, survive in space, and wield abilities he didn't understand. Leo had no superpowers. He just had himself. He wasn't sure that would be enough. As the Recton turned away with a final snicker, Leo exhaled slowly, reminding himself to stay calm. This was just the beginning. If humans had learned anything over the centuries, it was that survival often came down to figuring things out on the fly, and Leo had made a career out of being adaptable. Still, this wasn't exactly the same as jumping from track events to swimming on short notice. "You're going to need more than pluck to survive out there." The voice startled Leo. He looked down and saw a small, translucent alien hovering beside him, a jellyfish-like creature with a network of pulsing lights running through its body. The being's voice hummed telepathically in Leo's mind, soft and sarcastic. "You humans really think heart is enough? I've got heart and brains." Leo shot back, a little defensive. The jellyfish gave a flicker that felt suspiciously like laughter. "You're going to need both, and then some. I'm Zrin, by the way. I've seen a lot of fools try to win these games. You might be the first to look this clueless while doing it." "Gee, thanks," Leo muttered, though a small grin crept onto his face. At least someone here didn't seem openly hostile. "Don't take it personally," Zrin said, bobbing up and down in the air. "They think in terms of muscle and size. That's their problem. Yours is that you'll try to play by the same rules they do." Leo frowned. "What do you mean?" "Look around, human." Zrin gestured with a glow of light toward the alien athletes preparing for the first round of events. "They're all built to excel at something: speed, strength, endurance. You're built for what? Tenacity? Cleverness? Whatever it is, if you want to win, you'll have to stop thinking like them." Before Leo could ask what that meant, a voice boomed across the arena. "All competitors report to the staging platform." The stadium rumbled as the platforms began shifting into place, floating high above the ground. Some athletes spread wings and soared upward. Others simply teleported or floated gracefully toward the start zone. Leo, feeling awkward, took the elevator platform that hummed softly beneath his feet as it rose. When the platform reached the starting area, Leo found himself standing on a narrow track that zigzagged through the air in complicated loops. The first event was an obstacle relay, but with a twist. Different parts of the course had shifting gravity fields. Runners would have to adjust their speed and direction as gravity changed from one section to the next. Some parts floated in zero gravity, others would pull downward like black holes, and a few would reverse gravity entirely. Leo scanned the alien competitors, his nerves spiking again. They all looked so confident, like they had done this 1,000 times. A three-legged reptilian athlete hissed excitedly beside him, while a winged competitor adjusted its feathered limbs for maximum lift. Leo had no idea what half of these beings were capable of, but they all seemed far more prepared than he was. He bounced lightly on his feet, trying to psych himself up. "You've trained for this," he told himself. Well, not exactly this, but something like it, sort of. Earth had trained him for 10 different events back home. This was just another challenge, right? The whistle blew, and chaos erupted. Leo sprinted forward, his shoes slapping against the glowing platform. He focused on his breathing, trying to find his rhythm, but the moment he hit the first gravity shift zone, everything went sideways. Literally, the force yanked him off the track, sending him tumbling head over heels into a zero-gravity section. He flailed, twisting mid-air in a desperate attempt to regain control. Around him, the alien athletes glided through the shifting fields with ease, using wings, extra limbs, or inborn instincts to adjust. Leo, meanwhile, felt like a squirrel trapped inside a washing machine. He managed to grab hold of the edge of a platform just in time to pull himself back into the race. He gasped for breath, heart pounding in his chest. He was already at the back of the pack. He tried to pick up the pace, but another gravity shift sent him spiraling again. By the time he reached the finish line, every other athlete had already crossed it. Panting and disoriented, Leo collapsed to his knees. The crowd roared with laughter, and some of the competitors exchanged amused glances. One alien athlete clapped Leo on the shoulder, his grin mocking but not unkind. "Better luck next time, Earthling," Leo groaned, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. This was going to be harder than he thought. Zrin floated down beside him, pulsing softly. "Told you. Think differently, Leo, or you're going to keep eating dirt out there." Leo exhaled, frustration and determination swirling in his chest. Quitting wasn't an option. He hadn't come all this way to fail. Not yet. He glanced at the other athletes celebrating their victories, an idea slowly forming in his mind. Maybe Zrin was right. Maybe he didn't need to be the strongest or the fastest. Maybe he just needed to be smarter. Leo sat at the edge of the training platform, still catching his breath from the disastrous first event. His legs felt like jelly, and the sting of humiliation gnawed at him worse than the fatigue. He stared down at his hands, flexing his fingers absent-mindedly. What the hell was I thinking? This wasn't just an ordinary race, it was a spectacle where the rules of physics got thrown out the window and gravity had a mind of its own. He had fought tooth and nail to get here, believing that his tenacity, discipline, and experience in Earth's decathlon would carry him through. Instead, he had gotten his butt handed to him in front of a roaring alien crowd, and the worst part, they didn't even seem malicious about it. He was just irrelevant. As Leo sulked in silence, Zrin drifted down beside him. "So, how did it feel to fly?" "Fly?" Leo snorted. "I felt like a plastic bag caught in a hurricane." He buried his head in his hands, the weight of failure pressing down. "This isn't going to work, is it? You expected it to work?" Zrin pulsed with what Leo guessed was amusement. "You humans. Optimistic to a fault." Leo huffed, frustrated. "You're not helping." "That's because I'm trying to help you see the truth. Strength, speed, even endurance. You won't beat them at their own game. You'll never be the fastest or strongest here." Leo didn't answer right away, letting the silence hang between them. A heavy feeling settled in his chest, the kind that made him feel small and inadequate. It was like being in a dream where you run as fast as you can but never get anywhere. Back on Earth, he was one of the best. Here, he was outclassed at every turn. "You know," Zrin said, "the only reason they let your planet join the tournament was to be polite. The Galactic Council thinks it'll keep things inclusive. They don't actually expect you to win." "Yeah? Well, maybe I was stupid enough to think I had a shot." Leo shook his head, swallowing down the bitterness. He could feel the beginnings of doubt clawing at his resolve. What was the point in competing if he didn't even belong here? He remembered the looks from the Recton champion and the other alien athletes. Mocking, dismissive, almost indifferent, like his presence didn't matter. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was way in over his head. He could quit now, go back home and say he gave it a shot. People would understand. They'd call it a brave attempt. At least he tried. But the thought of going home as a failure made Leo's stomach churn. He didn't come all this way just to be a token participant. Quitting would hurt worse than losing. No, he needed to try something, anything. Leo began, then faltered. I've always believed if I worked hard enough I could make it through anything, but it's different here. I don't even know where to start. That's because you're still thinking in human terms, Zrin said. The little jellyfish flickered with a knowing glow. You're trying to compete as if you're on equal ground, when the game was rigged against you from the start. Leo exhaled slowly, the gears in his mind starting to turn. He hadn't trained his whole life just to give up at the first hurdle. He didn't need to be like them. Maybe he just needed to think outside the box, find a way they wouldn't expect. But how? As if reading his thoughts, Zrin drifted closer. You're not going to win alone. If you want to make it through the next rounds, you need a team. Leo blinked. What team? I'm the only one from Earth. Then build one, Zrin said. Mix and match. Other species do it all the time in battle arenas, just not here. Leo thought about the other athletes. Most of them were part of cohesive squads from the same planet or species, each one designed to complement the others. The Rectans relied on their brute strength. The insectoid species worked like a hive mind, finishing each other's movements with mechanical precision, and the flying creatures dominated the air, making them impossible to catch. Leo had none of that. He had nobody. I'm a solo act, Leo pointed out. Even if I could convince someone to join me, why would they? I'm just the weak link. Zrin gave a soft pulse. Because there are outcasts everywhere, Leo. You just have to find them. Leo frowned, but the words stuck with him. He had seen it earlier. Some athletes left out or overlooked by their own kind. A gangly insectoid sitting alone after his team berated him for being too slow. A plant being struggling to keep up with the rest of her vine-based squad. Maybe these athletes didn't belong in their groups either, and maybe that was something Leo could work with. An idea started to take root in his mind. What if he didn't compete like everyone else? What if he stopped trying to fight battles he could never win on his own? Humans were known for a lot of things, but teamwork and creativity were at the top of the list. Maybe his best shot wasn't playing by the rules everyone else followed, but building something new. He felt the spark of hope flicker for the first time since the game started. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. This wasn't over yet. Leo stood, stretching his sore limbs. Okay, he said. If I can't outmuscle them, I'll outthink them. I need a team. Zrin hovered beside him, amused. You're not much of a strategist, are you? Nope, Leo grinned. But I learn fast. Over the next hour, Leo wandered through the training halls, scouting the overlooked athletes he had noticed earlier. He started with Krell, the insectoid runner who had been shunned by his hive mates for being too slow. When Leo approached him, Krell looked surprised and suspicious. Why would you want me on your team? The insectoid asked, his antennae twitching skeptically. Because you're not slow, Leo said. You're just not fast enough for them, but maybe you're exactly what I need. Next, he found Rosa, the plant being whose vines were razor-sharp but slow to react. She reluctantly agreed to join when Leo promised her she wouldn't have to compete the way her squad expected. Finally, Leo approached Farn, the amphibian powerhouse whose strength came at the cost of precision. Farn had been dropped from his original team for being too clumsy. Leo grinned. Perfect. I don't need perfection, I need muscle. Zrin watched all of this unfold with a flicker of approval. You're either very clever or very desperate, the little alien said. Both, Leo admitted. By the time Leo gathered his ragtag crew, he felt something strange. Hope. Maybe they weren't the strongest, the fastest, or the most talented, but they were misfits with something to prove, and that was a start. This wasn't going to be easy, but Leo knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going down without a fight, and with a little luck, his oddball team just might surprise everyone, including themselves. For the first time since arriving at the Galactic Games, Leo felt a grin spread across his face. This wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. Leo stood in the center of a small, empty training arena, watching his new teammates assemble. Calling it a team might have been generous. Right now they looked like a collection of spare parts tossed into a heap. Krell, the insectoid runner, twitched nervously. His thin, armored body gleamed under the stadium lights, but every movement was jittery, as if he might bolt at the first sign of trouble. Rosa, the vine-covered plant being, stood still and silent, except for a subtle rustling sound as her leaves shifted. She was an intimidating sight, but she radiated a quiet frustration, as if she didn't expect much to come from this experiment. And then there was Farn, the hulking amphibian with thick, rubbery limbs. Farn loomed over everyone but looked more confused than menacing, his large black eyes blinking slowly in opposite directions. It wasn't the dream team, but it was Leo's team, and that meant they had a chance. Maybe, hopefully. All right, gang, Leo said, clapping his hands together with more enthusiasm than he felt. Here's the deal. We're not here to compete like the others. We don't have to be faster, stronger, or more powerful. We just need to be smarter. Creel twitched his antennae, glancing toward the training arena's exit. We're doomed. Not yet, we're not, Leo said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. We're going to train together, figure out how to combine our strengths and cover each other's weaknesses. Rosa let out a dry, rustling sigh. I was hoping you had more of a plan than just figure it out. Leo grinned. Don't worry, I've got at least half a plan. Farn rumbled softly, scratching his head. What if we just hit everything really hard? We'll keep that in the back pocket, Leo replied. But we need a little more finesse if we want to survive the next event. So let's get to work. What followed could best be described as chaos. Leo started by testing each teammate's abilities, trying to figure out how they moved and what they could do under pressure. He had Krell run short sprints around the arena, but the insectoid's nerves got the better of him. He kept overthinking every step, which slowed him down. Rosa tried practicing her vine attacks, but her strikes were sluggish, her movements clunky when compared to the agile alien squads they would face. Farn, eager to help, volunteered to act as a target for the others. Unfortunately, his bulk made him a magnet for disaster. Every time Rosa's vines whipped in his direction, he got tangled up. Sorry, Rosa groaned as she tried to untangle Farn for the third time. No problem, Farn croaked cheerfully, even though he looked like a giant toad stuck in a ball of Christmas lights. Leo rubbed his temples. Okay, clearly we're not going to outmaneuver anyone with this mess. Krell buzzed in frustration. We can't win like this. The other teams are too good. They've trained their whole lives together. We can't just slap together a team in one day and expect to win. Leo could feel the frustration spreading through the group. This was exactly what he was worried about. They were trying to compete on the same terms as the other alien teams, and it wasn't working. He needed to think differently. Zrin floated nearby, observing the chaos with a flickering glow. You know, watching this train wreck is almost worth the trip, the jellyfish-like alien said. Glad you're entertained, Leo muttered. But if you've got any genius advice, now's the time to share. Zrin pulsed with amusement. You're the one trying to do the impossible, Leo. I'm just here for the show. Leo rolled his eyes. Thanks for nothing. But as he turned back toward his struggling teammates, an idea started to form in his mind. Zrin wasn't wrong. The other teams had an advantage because they played by the rules, but Leo's team wasn't built for rules. They were misfits, outcasts. What if, instead of trying to fight that, they leaned into it? Okay, everyone, listen up, Leo shouted, clapping his hands to get their attention. We've been going about this all wrong. We don't need to copy the other teams. We need to play to our strengths, and that means doing things a little differently. Rosa crossed her leafy arms. What exactly does that mean? It means we stop trying to be perfect and start embracing the weird, Leo said. You've all got something special. We just need to figure out how to use it creatively. He pointed to Krell. You're faster than you think, Krell. Your problem isn't speed. It's hesitation. You're trying too hard to be precise. So stop thinking and just move. Krell twitched his antennae nervously. But what if I mess up? Then mess up fast, Leo said. Speed first, precision later. We'll figure it out as we go. Next, Leo turned to Rosa. Your vines are slow, but they're strong. So instead of focusing on speed, set traps. Use your vines to block paths or snag opponents when they least expect it. Rosa's leaves rustled thoughtfully. I could do that. Finally, Leo looked at Farn. And you, big guy, you're our anchor. When things get out of control, you're the one we'll rely on to hold the line. Farn puffed out his chest proudly. I like holding things. Leo grinned. Perfect. Now let's try this again. This time, on our terms. The next few hours were messy, but progress began to take shape. Krell ran sprints without worrying about perfection, and his speed improved with each attempt. Rosa practiced setting ambush points with her vines, snaring unsuspecting objects mid-air. Farn, meanwhile, worked on staying grounded and absorbing impacts, proving himself to be an unmovable wall when needed. It wasn't flawless. In fact, it was still pretty rough around the edges, but for the first time, Leo could see how they fit together. Each of them brought something unique to the table, and when they leaned into their strengths, they started to look like, well, maybe not a well-oiled machine, but something close to it. After another successful practice, Leo clapped Farn on the back, dodging a stray vine from Rosa. See, we're getting somewhere. Krell buzzed quietly. You really think we have a chance? Leo thought for a moment, then smiled. Yeah, I do. Zrin floated beside him, glowing softly. Not bad, human. You might actually make something out of this disaster after all. High praise coming from you, Leo said with a smirk. As the team wrapped up for the day, Leo felt a strange sensation bubbling inside him. It wasn't confidence exactly, There were still plenty of ways this could go wrong, but for the first time since arriving at the Galactic Games, Leo felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Hope. This might just work. They weren't the strongest or the fastest. They weren't the most experienced or well-coordinated, but they were something else. They were different, and if there was one thing Leo had learned about humans, it was that being different wasn't a weakness. It was an advantage. With a grin on his face and a renewed sense of purpose, Leo called out to his team, "All right, weirdos. Same time tomorrow. Let's show this galaxy what a bunch of misfits can do." This wasn't going to be easy. But then again, nothing worth doing ever was. The crowd roared as the stadium's platforms shifted into place for the quarterfinals. Leo stood at the edge of the field, the distant hum of alien chatter vibrating through the air. He glanced at his teammates, Krell, Rosa, Farn, and Zrin, then up at the floating screens that projected the tournament brackets. Somehow, against all odds, they had made it this far. They weren't just surviving, they were winning. The earlier rounds had been brutal, but each time they faced impossible odds, Leo's team had pulled through using tricks, teamwork, and a little bit of luck. Their unpredictable strategies had thrown the other alien teams off balance. No one had ever seen a mixed-species team like this before, and the element of surprise had been their greatest weapon. But now, the games were getting harder. The galaxy's most elite athletes had taken notice of the underdog team from Earth. Leo could feel the weight of those expectant stares, the kind that said, "This is where the fun ends." Leo cracked his knuckles and turned toward his team. "All right, folks, we've come this far. We know what we're doing. No reason we can't go all the way, right?" Krell buzzed nervously. "Except for the part where they're all faster and stronger than us. And better trained," Rosa added, vines twitching in agreement. "And mean," Farn rumbled. Zrin bobbed in the air beside them, his bioluminescent lights flickering with amusement. "I see the optimism is contagious today." Leo grinned, though his stomach churned. "We've beaten them before. We'll do it again. Stick to the plan. Adapt, improvise, and stay weird. If we play by their rules, we lose. But if we play by ours, who knows?" He spread his hands wide. "We might just win." The buzzer rang, signaling the start of the quarterfinal round. The field rearranged itself. Sections of platform began floating, spinning, and shifting their gravity in real time. The announcer's voice boomed through the stadium. "Quarterfinal event. Gravitational combat tag." Leo's heart raced. This was one of the hardest events in the tournament, a chaotic mix of speed, strategy, and aerial combat. The objective was simple: tag your opponents while avoiding being tagged yourself. The team with the most points at the end of 10 minutes would advance to the semifinals. But the gravity-shifting platforms added an unpredictable layer, constantly flipping the playing field between weightlessness and crushing force. The alien team they were facing, a squad of 4 muscular serpent-like creatures with glowing scales, slithered onto the opposite platform. They hissed and twisted in unison, their bodies flickering with sparks of energy. Leo turned to his teammates. "Okay, Farn. You stay on defense. Keep those snakes off us if they get too close." Farn nodded eagerly. "I'll smash them." "Rosa, lay traps across the platforms. Slow them down however you can." "Got it," Rosa said, her vines twitching with readiness. "Krell, your only job is speed. Don't think, just move. And whenever you see a chance, tag one of them." Krell buzzed nervously but gave a determined nod. Leo cracked his neck and smiled. "And me? I'll be the bait." The buzzer sounded and chaos exploded across the field. The gravity fluctuated wildly. One moment, Leo was leaping through the air, weightless, and the next, he felt like an elephant had stepped on his chest as the pull intensified. He focused on staying mobile, dodging and weaving across the spinning platforms, keeping the serpents' attention on him. The serpents came at him fast, their bodies twisting gracefully through the air as if they were born for this. Leo ducked beneath one, narrowly avoiding a swipe, and somersaulted onto a nearby platform. The gravity shifted again, and Leo launched himself sideways just in time to avoid getting tagged. "Krell, now!" Leo shouted. Krell shot out from the opposite side of the field like a bullet. No hesitation, just pure instinct. He zipped between the serpents, brushing one with a light tap before disappearing into the next gravity well. The alien hissed in frustration as Krell buzzed away, scoring the first point. "Yes!" Leo cheered, though the celebration was short-lived. One of the serpents spun mid-air and shot toward Rosa, its electric scales crackling with energy. Rosa lashed out with her vines, wrapping them around the serpent's body and pinning it to the platform. "Gotcha," Rosa whispered triumphantly, the vines tightening with a slow, deliberate squeeze. But the serpent used the shifting gravity to its advantage, coiling tighter and flipping itself free of Rosa's grip. It surged toward Farn, who stood waiting like a living wall. "Time to smash!" Farn bellowed, as the serpent launched itself at him. Farn swung both arms in a wide arc, catching the creature mid-air. With a triumphant roar, he hurled it across the platform like a rag doll. The crowd erupted with cheers and gasps, amazed that Leo's team was holding their own. The score was tied. As the minutes ticked down, the serpents began to change their strategy, growing more aggressive. One of them targeted Leo relentlessly, cornering him against a platform's edge. Leo dodged and twisted, barely avoiding its snapping jaws. "Guys, a little help?" Leo called, breathing hard. Krell zipped past, tagging another serpent and adding another point to their score. Rosa laid a net of vines across the platform's surface, but the serpents were getting faster, adapting to their movements. Leo could feel the pressure mounting. They needed one more point to secure the win, but the serpents weren't giving them any openings. The gravity shifted again, pulling everything upward. Leo felt himself floating, his limbs weightless. One of the serpents surged toward him, ready to tag him out, and that's when Leo saw it. A chance. "Farn, catch me!" Leo shouted. Without questioning, Farn braced himself as Leo kicked off the platform, hurling himself through the air. Just as the serpent reached him, Farn grabbed Leo mid-flight and used the momentum to swing him like a hammer. Leo twisted in mid-air and stretched his hand out. Time seemed to slow as he closed the distance, his fingers brushing the serpent's glowing scales just before the buzzer rang. The serpent hissed in frustration, and the crowd exploded with cheers. Leo's team had won. Panting and grinning, Leo floated back down to the platform as the gravity normalized. They had done it. The screens overhead lit up, showing their victory confirmed. The score, 5-4. They were through to the semifinals. Rosa let out a satisfied rustle, her vines swaying gently. Krell buzzed with excitement, his wings fluttering uncontrollably. Farn gave Leo a hearty slap on the back, nearly knocking him over. "We did it!" Creel cheered. Leo grinned. "Yeah, we did. And we're not done yet." Zrin hovered beside him, glowing with amusement. "Well, well, human. It looks like your team of misfits might just make it to the finals after all." Leo's grin widened. The semifinals were next and they were going to be even tougher. But for the first time, Leo wasn't worried. His team wasn't perfect, but they were getting better with every match. They were adapting, learning, and most importantly, they were winning. As the team left the arena, Leo looked up at the tournament brackets again. Their names were already locked in for the next match, right under the Recton champion squad. Leo's heart pounded in his chest. The Recton would be waiting for them in the semifinals, ready to crush any hope they had left. But that was fine. Leo and his team had a habit of doing the impossible, and they weren't done surprising the galaxy yet. The stadium trembled with the excitement of the crowd, their cheers vibrating across every platform in the Stadium of Stars. Leo's heart thudded in his chest as he stood on the field, eyes locked on the Recton champions team, 4 towering warriors with rippling muscles, glowing eyes, and that same smug, condescending grin plastered across their faces. The Recton leader, the 4-armed brute who had mocked Leo on day 1, flexed his upper arms as if to remind Leo just how small and outmatched he was. "Ready to get squashed, little human?" The Recton taunted, his voice like a roll of thunder. Leo smirked, trying to hide his nerves. "You'll see soon enough." The semi-final victory had shaken the galaxy. No one expected Leo's ragtag group of misfits to make it this far. Now they stood one match away from the championship, one event between them and the impossible. The announcer's voice echoed through the air, booming from every corner of the floating stadium. "Final event, the Nexus Gauntlet, a test of strength, speed, intelligence, and teamwork. A reminder to all competitors, only through unity and skill can you conquer the Nexus." Leo's pulse quickened. He had heard of the Nexus Gauntlet. It was legendary, a course that crushed even the best competitors. It demanded perfect coordination, adaptability, and endurance. Teams had to solve puzzles while under fire, navigate gravity fields that shifted randomly, and face off against hostile simulations, all while working as one. Leo looked at his teammates. Krell fluttered his wings anxiously, but gave a determined nod. Rosa's vines curled and uncurled, ready to set traps when needed. Farn cracked his knuckles, his wide grin making him look eager to tackle anything thrown at him. Zrin hovered at Leo's shoulder, glowing a soft blue. Despite all the odds, they had made it here. Now, they just needed to finish what they started. "Listen up," Leo said, gathering his teammates close. "We stick to the plan. We don't have to be perfect. We just need to stay ahead, stay weird, and keep them guessing. They think they've got us figured out, but that's their mistake." The buzzer sounded, and the first stage of the gauntlet began. The first part of the course was a massive maze of floating platforms, each shifting unpredictably between gravity fields. Some sections pulled competitors down like magnets, while others made them float weightlessly. The Rectans took off immediately, leaping across the platforms with incredible strength, covering ground in giant bounds. They smashed through obstacles with brute force, moving as if gravity was just a mild inconvenience. Leo's team launched into action, not trying to match the Rectans' raw power, but instead outsmarting the maze. "Krell, take point!" Leo shouted. Krell zipped through the narrow gaps between platforms, using his small size and wings to his advantage. While the Rectans struggled to slow down on platforms with reversed gravity, Krell simply hovered, waiting for the right moment to dart ahead. Rosa trailed behind, laying vines in key places to trip up the Rectans. The first trap worked perfectly. One of the Rectans stumbled, lost his footing, and fell into a gravity pocket, tumbling helplessly through the air. Farn lumbered along, unaffected by the shifting fields. When in doubt, he just held on to the nearest surface. "I like this part," he bellowed, grinning as he hauled Leo across a floating platform with one hand. They reached the end of the maze at the same time as the Rectans, but Leo's team had used less energy. They were still in the game. Next up was a massive puzzle grid, a series of interconnected tiles that had to be activated in the right order to open the next section of the course. The challenge required both precision and speed, and the platforms underneath would drop anyone who got the sequence wrong. The Rectans immediately began stomping on tiles, relying on brute force. "Rosa, this one's yours," Leo said. Rosa's vines snaked across the grid with delicate precision, brushing each tile carefully. Meanwhile, Krell buzzed across the grid, scouting ahead for patterns. Farn planted himself at the center of the grid, swatting away drones that tried to interfere. The Rectans set off 2 traps and lost time trying to recover, but Rosa cracked the sequence flawlessly, opening the path forward. They slipped through the grid just ahead of the Rectans, and the crowd roared in surprise. The next section was an arena filled with flying drones and simulated enemies. Competitors had to fend off the attackers while completing objectives scattered throughout the arena. "Time for some smashing!" Farn shouted, charging into the fray. He barreled through the drones like a wrecking ball, knocking them out of the air with his massive arms. Krell zipped between the chaos, triggering the objectives they needed to clear the stage. Rosa's vines lashed out in every direction, snaring drones and holding them in place. Leo dodged and weaved, keeping an eye on the Rectans, who were closing in fast. They were overwhelming the drones with sheer force, and it was clear they would catch up soon. "Time to move!" Leo shouted. Farn gave one last mighty swing, knocking a drone into the Rectan leader's path, buying them a few precious seconds. They cleared the combat arena just as the Rectans smashed through the final objective. The finish line was in sight. The final stretch was a mad dash across shifting platforms, with energy beams firing from all directions. The Rectans were right behind them, gaining ground with every leap. "Stick to me!" Leo shouted as they hit the first platform. The energy beams zipped through the air. Krell dodged left, Rosa swung right, and Farn tanked the hits, laughing as he barreled forward. But the Rectan champion was closing in fast, his 4 powerful arms pumping as he launched himself toward Leo. Leo saw the moment coming. The Rectan was aiming to tackle him off the platform. "Farn, now!" Leo shouted. Without missing a beat, Farn grabbed Leo mid-stride and hurled him forward with all his strength. Leo soared through the air, just as the gravity shifted to 0G, propelling him even farther. The Rectan champion leaped after him, but Leo twisted in midair, just barely brushing the finish line with his fingertips. The buzzer sounded. The crowd went wild. They had done it. Against all odds, Leo's team had won. Panting and grinning, Leo floated down as the gravity returned to normal. His teammates swarmed around him, Krell buzzing with excitement, Rosa's leaves rustling with joy, and Farn giving him a massive slap on the back. The Rectan champion stormed past, his expression dark, but he gave Leo a slow, reluctant nod of respect. "Not bad, human," he growled. Leo grinned. "Told you we'd surprise you." The announcer's voice boomed across the stadium. "Champions of the Galactic Games, Team Earth." As the crowd erupted in cheers, Leo looked at his teammates, his friends, and felt something he hadn't expected. They hadn't just won a tournament. They'd proved that teamwork, creativity, and heart could triumph over brute force. This wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning, and Leo couldn't wait to see what came next.